And we are live. JT here. Welcome to the huddle. The huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's to learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. I want to take a moment to thank you, whether you are watching with us on YouTube or on Facebook, or whether you're listening to the audio on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me and my special guest today. And here's my reminder to you. The mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's wide open. So my challenge to you is to go all in on this conversation, to remove any distractions and get laser focus on the here and the now. And I guarantee you, you will gain a valuable nugget of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. I've been looking forward to my conversation with my special guest today. We connected a few weeks back, and it was interesting when I saw the name. I asked him a questions about our past, and it was interesting that a few years ago, we'll say, despite our youthful looking appearance, our lives actually did interconnect. My guest in the huddle today is currently serving as the Chief Operating Officer for Atavus. My guest in the huddle today is Kerry Carter. How are you today, brother?
Excellent, man. Thanks for having me, JT. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
Should be a fun conversation.
Absolutely, brother. And before we get kicked off, pun intended, I just want to take a moment to count my blessings. And for me, this is a daily practice. Some days I do it better than others, but I do find the days I'm most consistent counting my blessings, I find that the days just feel a little bit lighter. Life seems a little bit more fun and enjoyable. I'm a big believer that counting the biggest blessing you can give anyone is your time and energy. So I just want to thank you again for blessing me with some of your time and energy today, brother.
Anytime, man. And I appreciate it. And like you said, I think anytime you get to kind of reconnect, with someone from the past and kind of see and hear people's journeys on how they got to where they are now. I mean, yeah. It's always an interesting conversation, and I really do appreciate that, taking time to stop and count your blessings. I'm a big believer in meditation and finding stillness and being intentional, and so it's definitely a practice that I continually working on as well. So yeah, I appreciate your time and the platform that you put together for folks like myself to share our stories. I think it's pretty important to share and give back too, right? And kind of inspire that next generation.
Absolutely, brother. So I'm curious. One of the things I like to remind myself or for anyone I work with is this idea that life is a game and games are supposed to be fun. I had a coaching colleague and a great friend that used to remind me that we all have our quirks. We all have these things that make us unique and different. So just celebrate them. So I'm curious, is there an interesting fact about you that maybe a lot of people don't know about that you'd be open to sharing with our community today?
I always keep a little fun fact in my pocket. Fun fact, I would say, so I don't know if most people know this, but I did make my motion picture debut in a very interesting movie back in the day, little film with a guy by the name of Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, Mr. Robin Williams as well, called Good Will Hunting. So I don't know if a lot of people know that movie. Obviously, went on to do really well. But that was like one of my first movies that I was an extra in. And so, it's funny looking back on it now, but it's the How About Them Apples scene where he meets Minnie Driver in the bar. So yeah, next time you watch it, as soon as they walk into the bar, you'll see a, smooth face, much younger version of myself wearing a Boston Red Sox t-shirt, and then I'm in about 3 scenes in that movie. So yeah, that's just a little fun fact for you.
Nice. Well, one great movie, right? And it's again for anyone that hasn't seen it, great movie, a classic. And it's interesting that that's one of those classic lines that anyone who's seen it,
Yep.
I'm sure that they remember that line being kind of one of those memorable ones that jumps to the top of
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, I had no idea at the time. I didn't know much about the guys that were doing it, or, I knew who Robin Williams was, but um, yeah, so it's just an interesting experience and fun. They shoot so many movies in Toronto that, getting out and being in a few of them was kind of a fun, exciting thing to do at that time.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm curious, have had this very decorated career in sport, right? You were first a high quality athlete, and then you transitioned to playing at the highest level. So I'm curious. Sport has obviously played an important role for you in your life.
Yeah.
What would you say has been a lesson that you have taken from sport? Again, I know there's many,
Hmm.
that you find you still apply that a lesson to other areas of your life. Maybe it's relationships, it's business,
Yeah.
it's just, yeah. What's that one lesson for you?
Yeah, I think there's a few, but the one I kind of I go back to more and more, as I go through my career, it's this idea and this ability to not get too high or too low. I'm
Mm,
already kind of I'm a laid back guy, island guy, Trinidad. So there's a little bit of that just laid back attitude in my nature. But I think um, as you go through tough situations, it's really easy to get really embedded in it. And like if it's a tough one and you're, sinking you down, or if it's a great one and lifting you up, um, either way, I think being able to stay balanced through those things, I think that's one of the
mm,
big things we learned in football. And the coach is kind of always impressed on us, no matter what's happening on the field, this too shall pass, right? Like, man, we just made a great play, scored a touchdown, we celebrated, but hey, we got to be ready for what's next. And even if we went in and we turned the ball over or fumble or whatever it is, also don't get too low because you got to come back and do it again. And so I think that's one of the great lessons that has stuck with me from, in my transition from football into the business world
mm,
is this idea of kind of, it's not, on some level it's stoicism, but stoicism sometimes gets greeted with the idea that there's no emotion involved in it, and you're just
mm.
like cold and frigid. It's not that. I think it's just this idea of understanding that it good or bad, these moments will pass, and you have to be ready to take on what's next. So
Mm. I love that. And why that resonates with me is this idea between like facts and stories, right? Like it's really
mhm.
easy sometimes to create stories and make things, I guess, quote unquote, bigger than they are. But when you just stick to facts, you're able to sort of be a little bit more neutral. And it's interesting. I had this flashback. I still remember when, we first sort of crossed paths. I remember it was Junior Metro Bowl days back in the day, and I remember walking past you guys as you were coming in after we played Michael Power. And I just remember walking past you and like was just like laser focused. Like there was no, like it was just very neutral. Like, so I guess I'm curious, is that something that you've always understood? Like I know you said based on your upbringing, your lived experience, it's something that's embedded culturally. Is it something that you've always been able to do and really understood?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? It's a little bit of nature, a little bit of nurture as well. Talking to my mom, obviously I have kids now, two girls, and so I feel like I learned a lot more about my past and growing up now that I have kids, talking to my mom about different stories and things that you just wouldn't remember necessarily. And one of those things, sorry about the noise
It's
here.
okay.
Uh, One of those things is, um, uh, sorry, I just got distracted by that. Um, ask me the question one more time.
Yeah, no, this idea of like being very neutral, right? To allowing things like this too
Yeah,
shall
yeah.
pass. Is that
Yeah.
something you've always understood?
Yeah, I think yeah, like I said, it's part nature, part nurture. So I think through, growing up as a kid, talking to my mom, she always said I would be more of the standoffish, sit on the outskirts and look at the entire situation. it's like different people, when they walk into a room, they do different things. Some people are very, focused or very aggressive and they go in. Some people want to be seen. Some people stand back and watch. And I was definitely more of the like stand back and watch and take it all in. And then when it's time to move with purpose, and be very direct. And I think it's kind of the same thing in sports. Like I think I had the most fun in practice. Like, I wasn't overly, anxious or like too caught up in it that you can't enjoy it, because you're there with a bunch of people you like and friends and, folks like that and teammates. So this idea of like, making sure you're able to get your work done, do all that, have fun, but when it's game time, it's time to go, man, be locked in, right? And don't let anything distract you, take you away from your plan, your goal, your focus. And I think that um that level of focus and like being able to block out the noise has been something that's been nurtured throughout the years, right?
Mhm.
Part of it is like compartmentalization, right? Being able to, like, man, when I walk in that door in this practice, I'm in here for practice. When I walk, take the next step, that we get into, games, you're focused on that as well. So,
Mhm.
just trying to make sure that those things are, they become part of my ethos and part of like who I am.
Yeah.
My wife would argue sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, being
Yeah.
able to just put this over here and move forward. But I think it's in the long run, it's definitely benefited me.
Mhm. I like that. And it's interesting. I sort of heard this idea of like being able to, they often talk about this idea of like, be able to read the room, right? And it's as you were sharing, I thought like, what's required of me right now? Like, it sounds like that's kind of a prompting question that you consciously, unconsciously do. So I'm curious. You're a Toronto guy, and then you transitioned to Stanford, and then you transitioned after Stanford to the NFL, CFL. So I'm curious, how did that ability to sort of be neutral, to be able to look at any situation, how did that serve you as you transitioned to different parts of your personal journey to greatness?
Man, that's a really great question. I would say, thinking about how going from, as I go up to each level, how that ability to focus and take away distractions has really served me well. I think, as you get to each level, there's more and more demand put on you from a mental capacity, right? So in high school, it feels like it's just more natural, right? The plays are simpler, your playbook's not huge, it's not overly complicated, it's more just based on athleticism. And a lot of teams just have, bigger, faster, stronger athletes, and that typically tends to be the determining factor, right? But as you get, each level you go up into, I think it definitely starts to separate itself as you think about um, the mental aspect of the game, right?
Yeah.
How do you separate yourself when everybody else is big, fast, strong at the same time, right? It becomes about that mental aspect of the game. So how you take on challenges, how you approach each play. Like I said, as you shift from one level to another, the mental aspect takes over more and more. Going from high school to college, same thing, right? You get guys that are big, fast, strong. So then it's a matter of like who can be the most consistent, who can make the least amount of mistakes. Um, and I think that becomes more of a determining factor rather than just, okay, yes, everybody's big, they're fast, they're strong, they can throw the ball a mile, all these things.
Mhm.
But the ones who are the most consistent and can avoid distraction, avoid mistakes, tend to be the ones that show up more on game day, make a lot more plays and end up, at the higher level. So I
Mhm.
think as I went from high school to college, that was kind of the biggest thing that I saw in terms of change of focus is, man, it's not just executing the play is one thing, but being able to do it over and over again in practice, showing up in games, doing all the mental work to get you ready so that when you're out on the field, you can just be at your most natural and just play and enjoy the experience and be in a moment.
Mhm.
And I think the same happened as you move from college to professional. It's just the degree of difficulty is a little bit higher, and the separation between athletes is a little bit smaller, right? Because same thing right now, it's like it's the best of the best from every school, from every college or university in um, in the country. So at that point, you make it to the NFL and CFL and things like that. It's just a higher degree of difficulty, but also the mental aspect of the game now with the complexities of the plays and the style of defenses that you're looking at, the adjustments that you have to make, the burden that's put on you as an athlete now goes beyond just knowing your plays, right? To be a better player, obviously quarterback has to know everything that's happening, but as a running back, I have to make sure that I know, okay, my role, responsibility, but also know what the line is doing, the identification of the mic, where they're shifting, so I can participate and help in the pass blocking, and then going out in route running, and then doing special teams. So I think the mental aspect of the game, slowly separates people as you get higher and higher. So even the guys that are great athletes, don't necessarily always have the same amount of success as they move up levels, because that mental aspect becomes more and more, I guess, central to success overall, I would say.
Mm. It's interesting. I appreciate you like sharing, kind of, giving us sort of insight into, behind the scenes. And it reminded me this idea that your body's an instrument of your mind, right? So like you were mentioning, you must keep this in check in order for this to perform. So I'm curious, was there anything part of your mental process that allowed you to dial into the moment, right? Because what I often find is, anyone can be energized, enthused, and positive and inspired when things are going well, when they perceive it as. But it's another thing where it requires a different discipline of mind. If you've had a few plays that haven't go as planned, you're 0-5. Like, was there anything that you did to really lock into the here and the now during those maybe more challenging times?
Yeah, I think there's different practices. I think visualization is a huge one. And I mentioned, I'm a big proponent of like meditation, and I think just those two things, right? Being calm, being still, and having something as like an anchor to go back to, no matter what the situation is, whether it's positive or negative, good or bad, like some things are going your way or they're not. Having the ability to come back to what's real versus what's imagined, right? Like, okay, what's the situation I'm in right now? Is it is my life being threatened, or am I just I'm in a game, and I'm disappointed with the results so far, and I want to do something to change that. So being able to kind of go back and pull yourself back into that moment to understand what's really happening. And then the visualization piece comes in because you've gone through it over and over, right? You've practiced it, you've walked through it, you've watched it on film, you've visualized it yourself, and then once you got out there to do it, when the real bullets are flying, you have all of those hours of practice that you put in beforehand to kind of pull from. But you got to be able to center yourself enough to pull from those things, right? So you can pull yourself out of the hole, adjust the things on the fly if things aren't going the way that you want. Understanding the dynamics and the culture of your team, and the people that can really help shift and move things. There's every team has people in different roles, right? Whether you're a team captain or a leader, or you're a vocal leader, or you're just kind of a guy that goes out and performs on a day-to-day basis and is just really consistent. We all play our roles, and even understanding that those dynamics and culture help with how you deal with adversity, right? And how you deal with success. And so I think the meditative piece, the being centered and being intentional about pulling from the practice and the times and the video and all the visualizations is what has helped me throughout my career. It's almost just really helping you to be at your best when the situation is the most difficult, or there's the most on the line, right? Like, we've had a ton of those situations throughout my career, and everything didn't always go the way we wanted, but at the same time, I do remember the feeling of, okay, being really locked in and being really focused and grounded to be able to at least execute at my best. Whether, there's a lot of different components and people and players and situations. So, the thing that one person does on one play, may not make the entire difference, but overall, just knowing that, yeah, I was able to execute at the highest level when the team needed it the most has been, I think that's what, those are the moments that stay with me, and those are things I kind of draw from to really, you know, position myself for success, I would say.
Yeah, no, I love everything you shared there. And it reminded me of two things, and two things really caught my attention. One, this ability to understand that your mind cannot distinguish between what's real and imagined.
Yeah.
And putting it into a sports context, anyone that's played, sport at a higher level understands that coaches always talk about, like, take your mental reps. Like, if you're not
Mhm.
physically on the field, watch the person in front of you, take your mental reps. And
Yeah.
it's interesting when you start to realize that you can actually train and condition your mind to
Mhm.
actually execute those things by watching, and your mind can't tell if you're
Yeah.
physically doing it or not. That's
Yeah.
important. And two, I love what you're talking about. Like, you sort of mentioned this idea of like celebrating your wins in
Mhm.
those moments where you're facing challenge, adversity, obstacles, that sometimes just mentally rehearsing, hey, I've experienced this before, I've
Mhm.
overcome it before. Even that simple reminder to
Yeah.
really shift
Yeah.
your thinking and your behaviors moving forward.
Yeah. No, I think that's a huge part of it, right? Um the ability to focus your mind enough to like remind yourself of that, like, hey, I gotta take a step and really, understand that I've, like you said, I've been in this position before. I know what to do, and the mental reps and the things that have prepared you for it
Mm.
are invaluable skills to have. Whether you're on the field or, working in the tech space or whatever it is. It's like being able to think on the fly, but also go back to the foundational things that helped you get to where you are. And I find myself doing that a lot more now. It's like, man, what are the things that, or even just the attributes that I know that have really been ingrained in me that give me it's almost an additional value, or just a point of differentiation from any other, you know uh entrepreneur or executive out there. Like, having this skill set in your back pocket and being going through all those things, I think if you can harness it and focus it, it can help in anything that you transition into, if you can turn those things into, real applicable skills to help add value to, an entity, a business, whatever it is that you're working on and working with.
Mm. I love that great reminder that very often, high quality athletes and coaches can transition well to other areas of life because there's certain qualities and that are embedded within sport as you move up. So it's
Yeah.
great, again, hearing that from, again, someone who's a leader, in the business world, in the entrepreneurial world. Um, so I'm curious, after having a successful career as a high quality athlete, you chose to venture into the world of entrepreneurship and business. So I'm curious, what inspired that decision, um, at that stage of your journey?
Yeah, honestly, I've always been entrepreneurial. Throughout my career. After, while I was in the CFL, in the NFL, started to do some work on the side, because I always have other interests and things, and so my path was kind of a little bit different. I was actually a pre-med student at Stanford. I studied medical anthropology. So it's essentially how medicine has evolved through different societies throughout the ages. So going back to like Eastern, medicine, and how we integrated things like, acupuncture with stem, and, going back to the shamans in Australia, and things that they did with natural forms of medicine and things like that. And, how some of our doctors still use a lot of those kind of naturopathic, approaches now. So these ideas and these things were always kind of there for me, and I was always looking for a way to apply it in a different manner, right? So I actually did, I think one of the things that inspired me, I did an internship with a guy by the name of Dr. William Fogarty. and he was in the Silicon Valley. He invented a Fogarty catheter, and it was for deep vein thrombosis. So essentially, it goes into a vein where it's, they're having circulation issues. It goes in and it spreads it and allows the blood to flow through, that vein. And the thing that kind of inspired me there is, he was, no longer practicing doctor, but he had dedicated himself to still helping people, but going the invention route. So he'd done a bunch of things and partnered with Johnson and Johnson and things like that. And so that actually, I was on this path, to become a doctor and go to medical school. But really what I wanted to do was, look for different ways to help people, right? And things like that. And so that just gave me almost the confidence to say, oh, okay, it doesn't have to be just this one path, right? There are other ways you can do that and other options. And so that kind of opened my mind up to the business world. And while I was playing, I did a bunch of different things to kind of see what else I had a passion for. So everything financial services, I did events, I was really interested in technology. So, in my off seasons, I would go and meet with folks that were already, out of their careers and looking into new ventures in the technology space. And mobile was one of the interests I had, like, early on in my career. So, that's what really inspired me. And then as I was transitioning, every off season I would go and do something. In the last two off seasons I was still playing, I partnered up with a friend of mine, an ex-teammate out here in Seattle, and really got into the tech space and mobile space, and helped them with the acquisition of a company that was a software development company. And so it just gave me the opportunity to jump in and learn on the fly. I kind of consider it like me going back to business school, but doing it in a much more intensive way on the run. But those ideas and those experiences really kind of inspired me to say, as you walk into these rooms, like, man, you do have value. You can bring a lot to the table, and you just got to find the thing that you're passionate about. And for me, I kind of gravitated towards the marketing side of things. I love the psychology, I love the storytelling, and I love this idea of bringing people together. So end up doing like experiential marketing, right? So working with brands and work with athletes and putting them together to create something new, whether that's, helping an athlete launch their nonprofit. And then we created a celebrity softball game, to help them launch their nonprofit, created the website, did all the social media, produced the events, got, the charities to be partners. So like that, all those different experiences kind of pieced together, helped me kind of find my path once I was getting ready to finish. And so the first thing I did, I jumped into the software development company, but really it was around mobile and digital development. And then, the first kind of venture that I had is I started my own marketing consulting agency, where I worked with athletes, I worked with brands on, kind of bringing the two together to create one-of-a-kind experiences. And I used my, obviously the connections on the football side on one side, and then what I'd learned in the digital kind of digital development community to put those two things together. And that's what kind of got me on the path, really.
I love that. And it's interesting, like, as you were sharing, it truly is like your lived experience. You are the true essence of a Renaissance man, right? Like, you were starting to look for these opportunities to be a long life learner, and you were always looking for those growth opportunities to see, hey, am I passionate about this? I'm willing to give it a go. And it's interesting how it sort of allowed you to sort of create your own thing, because you sort of took these different parts of your life and your worlds, and you sort of brought them together. So I think that that's a great reminder on, you always have the power to create a life that you truly feel blessed to live.
Absolutely, man. And now I feel like nowadays, especially with the tools and things that are available to access the direct access that, me as an athlete or any athlete has to their following, to fans, and even to brands, gives you even more of an opportunity to, first of all, leverage that, equity while you're still playing, right? To build your community, build your following. And at that time, you're not really necessarily looking to monetize them in certain ways, maybe with sponsorships and things like that. But as you do get to later points in your career, you do start thinking about, okay, well, yeah, what is next? And what am I passionate about? And I mean, with the numbers being what they are in terms of like participation in the NFL, like, the average career is 3.5 years. Um, a lot of guys don't leave necessarily. The majority of guys, I would say, don't leave necessarily. You kind of hear about the two sides, right? The guys that are making all the money in the quarterbacks and getting the multi-year deals with huge, guaranteed salaries. But the majority of the guys that play will have to go on and continue to work in their career, like guys like myself. Like I played 9 years professionally, 4 in the NFL, 5 in the CFL. But I knew, that wasn't going to be, in a way, I don't want to say the high point of my career, like high point of my life. Like if I'm only known for being a football player, then I don't think I've done enough with my life. If that is the be all end all for me, then I would be disappointed, because I just feel like you have so much more living to do once you're done. Most guys are done before they're 30. You have a lot of life left, ahead of you. So I hope that in my case, I would, be able to impact this world in a much more positive way long term with things outside of football, but leveraging everything that football has done for me and the platform has created for me, at the same time. But that's really, it's I think it's something that you do have to be very intentional about, but I definitely think you have the ability to do that nowadays with all the things that are at your fingertips. Now with the rules around NIL, the name, image and likeness things that are happening here in the US, like it's starting even earlier, right? There's pros and cons to that. But at the same time, I think everyone has the ability to kind of build on, um, you know, what they're doing with their career at that time, but still have an eye towards what's next.
Mm-hmm. A great reminder on this idea, and I had a great business coach that would often remind me that the quality of your questions will determine your quality of life. And it
Mm.
sounds like for you, you're someone who's continually asking thought-provoking questions to sort of challenge old ways of thinking, so that it sort of prompts you to get some clarity around what's next.
Yeah, I'm, I am. You mentioned a lifelong learner. I'd say I'm a student of life, man.
Yeah.
I'm always open to learning new things and having new experiences, because you have this one life and you can't limit yourself to only learning from your own experiences. That's that what's the purpose of reading books and watching movies and documentaries. Like you have to see, understand, and learn from other people's experiences as
Mhm.
well, because that's going to help give you some shortcuts and things along the way. But you definitely have to be open to learning and evolving, and even the transition from professional football into the business world and into the tech world and sports tech world, for me specifically, was that right? It's this evolution, and it's this um uh it's a big transition, but at the same time it's an evolution and a reinvention of yourself.
Mhm.
So how do you take everything that you've been through up to that point and have it be a value add to the next adventure, the next opportunity, and the next thing that you're next thing that you're looking to pursue from a life perspective, business perspective, whatever it is.
Hmm. Yeah, I know, and I can appreciate kind of that journey that you mentioned, because again, I know myself leaving the safe and comfortable world of teaching at the midpoint of my career,
Yeah,
sort of challenging yourself to like think of what's next. It's not always all sunshine and rainbows, right?
yeah,
It forces you and prompts you to go to some uncomfortable places.
yeah,
But I will say that if you have the discipline of mind, as to continue to walk and continue to challenge yourself, that
yeah.
it leads to beautiful places and new adventures.
Yeah, no, definitely can, man. I heard an analogy just recently, someone talking about, like, essentially how you prepare for the challenges that you're going to face in life, right? You think about uh, a sword being made, right? Starts off as this kind of bigger piece, but what do you got to do? You got to put it in the fire, right? You got to put it into the fire, and then it doesn't end there. You come out, it's not ready yet. You got to pound it down. You got to mold it. It's gotta you got to get it pounded down to a level that's nice and flat. And then you got to put it back in the fire again. So that you're gonna go through these things, right? You're gonna learn from them. You're gonna learn these lessons. You're gonna try to apply them. You're gonna succeed in some. You're gonna fail in some. But man, you're gonna go back through it over and over again, and your hope is that you come out on the other side, successful, happy, prosperous.
Yeah.
But the number one thing is that you learned, you learn from those lessons, right? Otherwise it makes the challenges even more painful if you go through them and learn nothing. Right.
Mhm.
I thought it was, a worthwhile analogy. And I was like, oh, I like that. It's a really easy visual to kind of picture.
Absolutely. I love the visual you painted there. So I'm curious, most recently, you're on this journey as the chief operating officer at Atavus. I'm curious. I know, in preparation for this, it's kind of interesting how you kind of found this passion, right? Like it was connected to your lived experience as a high quality athlete. So I'm curious, yeah, please share on why you felt this adventure with Atavus was, where you needed to be at this stage of the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was definitely. I mean, there's always like multiple factors that drive you towards being in a specific place at a specific time. And for me, I had left football 2011. I'd started my own thing, partnered up on a couple ventures, had a ton of fun building a few businesses in the sports space, in the digital space, tech space, things like that. But at the same time, I think my wife and I were about to have our second child, and my schedule was crazy. I was in the office, 5 days a week, but we're also hosting events, during football season, and be at a Monday night event and then a Thursday night event, and then in a suite on Sunday hosting for one of my clients and bringing athletes in, and so it was a lot. And I knew that for me, family was really important, and I wanted to spend more time. And so I, actually made a conscious decision to be like, okay, how do I step back and put myself in a situation where I can learn and grow, under the tutelage of some folks who've been through it. And it just so happened that a friend of mine was doing PR for this company, Atavus, at the time. And I'd known him for a couple of years. So I knew they were a rugby company originally, and they got into the football space after doing some work with the Seahawks. And then the Seahawks put out this hawk tackle video that went viral. And so Atavus was the company that they consulted with. And so when people started coming out and asking about the hawk tackle and things like that, Seahawks were pointing people over to that company, but they hadn't really launched in the digital space yet. And so, it was like kind of the convergence of, it's kind of the perfect storm. They were looking to launch their first set of online products in the football space, and that just so happened to kind of connect with my background. Obviously, being on the football side, being on the tech side, having the background, and then having connections here locally. So the opportunity, I think, just came to me at the right time. Went to an investor event, checked out what they were doing, and really connected with it. Obviously, because of my past and stuff, directly, just indirectly, just playing football. But this idea of I've heard about all the things that were being done with equipment and rules around the game, but this was the first time I really heard of any company addressing it from a technique perspective.
Mhm.
So this idea of tackling, removing your head out of tackling, using more of your shoulder, more of the rugby style of
Mhm.
tackling, which people can say what they will, but that's how tackling was originally taught in football. I think it's just evolved over the years as equipment has gotten safer in a sense. Guys get feel a little bit more protected, and then start kind of projecting themselves in all sorts of dangerous ways. And so that's a whole other conversation we can have. But I think my background and the connection that I had to this idea of tackling and safety. I had an incident in college with a gentleman by the name of Curtis Williams playing for University of Washington, where we collided on a play. I got up to go back to the huddle, and Curtis never got up. He came in, he hit with his head, and unfortunately ended up being paralyzed on that play. And unfortunately, Curtis passed away about a year after that incident, from separate complications. But that's something that stays with you for life, stays with me. And so this idea that that's always been kind of in me and part of me. And so when I saw what Atavus is doing from a tackling perspective, and really wanting to focus on youth and high school and teaching things the right way to avoid, something like that, it was an easy decision for me at that point. When I saw what they were doing and the impact it could have. So I definitely wanted to be a part of that, and it made it. That's why I joined. Atavus at that time, and it's been there for 6 years now, and company has grown. We've expanded, we've affected a ton of connected with a lot of coaches, but also the effect that we've had on youth and high school players in terms of teaching them how to keep their head out of tackling. We've seen tremendous growth and development in that aspect of the game. And because football has done so much for me, the platform of football, it's something that I will continually support as long as it's being done the right way. And I think we are one part of the solution. Like we mentioned, there's the wearables and all the things that they're doing to measure, and then there's also the new rules and stuff that are being put in place specifically by the NFL, and that trickles down into NCAA and high school. But this idea that you can actually change behavior of athletes, and have it not be mutually exclusive. So like performance and safety don't have to be mutually exclusive, right? If you change the behavior to actually have them, use their shoulder more, keep their head out of tackling, focus more on technique and going beyond just a made or miss tackle, showing how you can actually perform at a higher level and reduce the amount of head contact. Man, that's like the perfect storm. Right. So that's what really drew me to Atavus and has kept me here, for these 6 years that I've been a part of this organization, and just the impact that we can have on the game, and continuing to make sure that the legacy of the game is there for that next generation, whether it's, people starting with flag and moving up from there, whatever it is. I think it's too big of a platform, to let it be negatively affected in the way it's been, in terms of participation numbers and things like that. We know that's been declining quite a bit in the game. So, I just wanted to be a part of that solution.
I appreciate you, sharing, your lived experience through that. And I can only imagine, what you personally went through, even just, being, having you be personally affected by a contact within the game. What's interesting to me is how it sort of blends all, again, of these areas of your life, right? Your lived experience in football, right? In tech. I also love how you said it's it's changing behavior, right? Like that psychology piece that you like, which is part marketing.
Yeah.
And so it's
that's
really
all
interesting
marketing,
how it's
right?
kind of blended all your worlds.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I'm always going to be a head and a heart person, right? Like it has to make sense for both for me. Like, obviously football was that for me, right? I was passionate about it. It gave me a great platform, obviously allowed me to get a world-class education, and build a life, and a family, right? Like obviously the platform of football has allowed me to do a lot of things. And I think that I'm eternally grateful for that, and what it's been able to do in my life. So I thank the sport of football, but I also know that there's a lot of negativity around it, and a lot of things around that aspect of the game, especially with tackling and the head contact issue. Obviously, we just went through this whole issue with Damar Hamlin and what just happened there, and brings back a lot of those. Brings back a lot of those same issues around the game and memories, obviously for me as well. So it's been, I think the journey itself has been, a windy one. But I think all your lived experiences kind of put you in a place to, find what's real and what makes sense for you moving forward. So I'm sure, like with you, right, all the things that you've gone through have prepared you for the work that you're doing now, right? And work isn't everything, but it's a huge part of our lives. So you want it to at least blend and feel, authentic with what you want to wake up and do on a day-to-day basis.
So I'm curious, you were mentioning how this came from Seattle, right? Like, and why I find that interesting is like this best practices. And you mentioned earlier, like we can borrow a lot of wisdom from people who have been there, done that, that have walked the journey before us, right? We can save ourselves a lot of time, energy, money. Again, that's the power of having great coaches and mentors in our life. So I'm curious, what has the response been in the football world, considering this is coming from like the highest level? These are coming from the highest performing athletes and coaches, organizations in the world, and it's now sort of disseminating, filtering down. What has been the response from the football community?
Yeah.
At all levels.
Yeah, I think the football community has been very open and responsive to, you know, to adjusting the approach. I mean, obviously, these are guys who've been doing it for a long time, coaches who, have gone through their own lived experience and have a ton of background in this space. Um, but like we talked about before, right, you got to be open and willing to evolve, right, with the game, right? The game continues to evolve on a year to year basis with things that are changing. The game today looks different than it looked 10 years ago, and I'm sure it'll look different than it now, than it will 10 years in the future. But I think just coaches being open to the change, but also just open to learning new things and new approaches, right? It's not taking away from what they're doing. It's not, you're not coming in telling a coach, hey, I mean, you've been teaching tackling wrong. Here's how you really do it. Like, no, here's what we've learned. Here's what all the data is showing us. Like, man, what is your head used for in tackling, right? I come from that bite the ball, put your head into his chest era. And when you look at it, when we started to really look around and study it, and we studied everything from like Olympic powerlifters to wrestlers to boxers, we looked at, well, how do you generate power, right? And how do you control an opponent? And at no point in there did it say, okay, throw your head in there first, right? And this, I love my analogies, right? One of the best analogies that we have is, you and I in this room, and the room catches on fire. We got to get out, right? One door, we got to break it down. Every single one of us is going to try to do that. Not one of us will run into that door with our head first. Right. So your body already knows, right? It teaches you the best way to do it. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to put your same foot and your same shoulder down, because that's how you generate power. That's how a boxer generates power. You're going to keep your neck in a neutral position. We learned that from powerlifters, because if you're looking up or down, that reduces your ability to generate power by a certain amount, right? Same thing, right? When a boxer puts that foot down and he gets that jab in or gets that power punch in, it's not just from the punch itself, it's from the footwork, and like, okay, how's he turning on that foot to generate power? So all of those different things are like natural things that your body already does. And all we tried to do is like take the explanation of it and adapt it to a football audience, but back it up with real proof. Like we've broken it down into pre-contact and a contact phase, right? Every coach knows and understands that, but we've just created consistent language across the board so that every coach, whether you're a special teams coach, position coach, head coach, coordinator, the athletes are hearing the same thing from all the coaches. And then the way that you measure it, is very transparent, and guys see it. So now they know that, hey, we're not just looking at whether you made or missed that tackle. We are, yes, but you said if you have 2 guys that make 9 out of 10 tackles, how do you determine who's performing at a higher pace? Mm-hmm. Well, what else can we look at? Let's look at yards after contact. Let's look at, the footwork, and then let's look at the safety elements, right? Because if you can do something over and over and over, and it's a repeatable task, and you don't have a high risk of injury on it, then we want you to keep doing that, right? You look at 2 guys, right? Let's say Luke Kuechly and Bobby Wagner, right? 2 guys that were playing same time, top linebackers in the league, arguable both, Hall of Famers. But Luke, we did this study through Atavus on Luke, and Luke, about 30% of the time that he made a tackle, his head was involved, whether he was going high or his head was going across the body, right? Bobby, that number was in the low single digits, right? He is a shoulder tackler, chest tackler. He likes to get body on body. And what is that? You look at the kind of trajectory that their careers have taken. I'm not saying this is the only reason, but Luke's had multiple concussions over his career, ended his career early because of concussions and head contact. Arguably one of the best linebackers in the game at his time. But then you look at what Bobby's done, and Bobby's still playing now, still playing at a very high level, and that's just one anecdote to kind of show you. But that's how we look at how these little things that you may take for granted have a much bigger effect on the game and on the individuals involved, and the longevity of your career and the risk and all of those things, but still help you to perform at a high level.
I love that because it sort of blends this idea that numbers are facts, numbers are objective. So I love how you're sort of bringing in these worlds so that people actually have data that then they can make more informed decisions, right? I think is where the blessing is. So I'm curious, I want to be respectful of your time, brother. If anyone out there is like, this has piqued their interest and they want to learn more about Atavus, they want to connect with you, what would the best way for them to do that be?
Yeah, I mean, check us out on social media. We're really active on there, just at Atavus Football on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok. Even we started doing some TikToks lately. So, but yeah, I mean, and then I'm everywhere as well on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, but and our website is atavusfootball.com. Just check out what we're doing. I think it's really a positive thing for the game. We're working with teams from youth all the way up to the pro level. We're working with school districts. We're working with the entire state of Texas and Georgia, and we just started doing some work with Arizona, Florida, like all these different state organizations that are looking to make sure that that's being done the right way, and safety is a big part of their decision-making process. So you can find us all over the place, but if you have any questions or anything, please feel free to reach out to us, hit us up on social, football support at atavus.com if you want to send an email. But we try to be there, and we're responsive and answer questions, but we're really looking to connect with coaches at all levels, across not just US, but obviously we work up in BC and Canada, we have Australia, Germany. Like we're kind of this global entity, trying to do as much as we can for the platform of football. So
absolutely, and I'll be more than happy to share all those handles on social in the description, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, or on the podcast. Kerry, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. I want to take a moment to acknowledge you for the great man you are, the great husband, the great dad, the great, but more importantly, the great human being you are. The one thing that's really has resonated with me from our conversation today is how you embody what a true long life learner is. Like you're constantly seeking to learn, to grow, to evolve. And, as we talked about, like that's where all the blessings and the adventures in life really come from. So I just want to thank you for giving me that reminder today and sharing your lived experience with our community today.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me and for the kind words. Every day I think you wake up and you try to do your part, and you thank God for another day, and hope that you can do something in this day and to make the most of it, and really help move things forward, both for yourself but for mankind and humanity. Right? There's so much negativity in the world and so many things to be down on, but if you step back and you look at it on a day-to-day basis, we have so much to be thankful for. Things are not all doom and gloom, man. Like the sun is shining. I have a roof over my head. I have a wife and children who love me. I have a great family. I love the work that I do. I don't have a lot to complain about. So I think just that constant reminder, man, to yourself on a daily basis of your worth and your place in this world is always a positive thing. And so thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to your audience, and for creating the platform so that folks can hear stories of success. And I think part of me and part of my mission is I want to inspire and instill hope. That's kind of my mantra that I use, but also redefining success. Like is another thing I think about. How do you redefine what success means? Even from an athlete perspective, right? We think about these big contracts, and but most of us are going to go on and have long working careers and life afterwards. And so I think you have to redefine what success is, because I feel like one of the most successful people in the world because of all the things that I mentioned, right? And it's not it's not a record deal. It's not making into the NFL. Those are all great things and great stops along the way, but I don't think that's what makes me successful.
Yeah,
So I appreciate it, and I thank you for the time and the platform.
absolutely, brother. So folks, Kerry drops so many valuable nuggets of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. But as I like to remind you every time in the huddle, knowledge is potential power. It's the consistent and focused application of great knowledge that actually creates great results. So my challenge to you today is to take one of these valuable nuggets of wisdom and go apply it to your life today. And as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, you are deserving of greatness. You are worthy of greatness. You are greatness. And my only ask from these conversations is, if it resonated with you, if it touched your heart, then please share it with a friend, a loved one, a teammate, or someone that you feel just needs to hear these inspiring and positive and empowering messages. And the more people we have listening to, understanding, and applying these simple ideas to their life, the more blessed this world will be. As always, I look forward to chatting with you next time in the huddle. Have a blessed rest of your day.